Welcome to the Twin Bill Podcast. I'm your host, Scott Bolohan. At 93 years old, Jerry Izenberg has been a sports writer and columnist for over 70 years, writing for the Star Ledger in Newark, New Jersey, and covering every Super Bowl from the first one to Super Bowl 53, while winning countless awards. His latest book, Larry Doby in Black and White, the story of a baseball pioneer, may be his most important work yet, shining light on the often overlooked figure in American history, who was also a close friend of Jerry's. I gained a completely new respect for Doby, who had to endure everything that Jackie Robinson went through and more. Jerry also has some pretty incredible stories. I hope you enjoy. Jerry, thank you so much for joining us today. It's an absolute honor to have you here. So a lot of people are familiar with Jackie Robinson's path to the majors. What was Larry Doby's?
My three closest friends in the world, not in any order, Muhammad Ali, Larry Doby, and Monty Irvin. And Monty and Larry were a package. Because a lot of people don't know, when Larry was a high school kid in Patterson, the summers he still played baseball. You know, he was a great athlete, the greatest athlete ever to attend Patterson Eastside. All-state baseball, all-state basketball, all-state football, and ran track. And just an amazing guy. And Monty and he actually knew each other in the summer. Monty was much older, but they knew each other in the summer because they both played for a black semi-pro team called the Patterson Smart Set. The Smart Set is a black social club, and they sponsored the team. They were the double play combination. Both of them wound up as outfielders, but they were the double play combination. And one day, Monty, there was a first base, the Newark Eagles, all black team, of course. Lenny Pearson was the first baseman, and he had a girlfriend who went to Patterson Eastside High School. And he said, "Larry, come take a ride with me. It's an hour drive." I said, "Okay, I'll go with you, but if the high school's playing, I'll go stop by and watch them, and then you pick me up on your way back." So he did. And he saw this skinny kid get up to bat, hit one over the fence and into the nearby Great Falls of Patterson. Disappeared in the water. And Monty said, "I got to tell Abe." Abe was Abe Manley, who owned the Eagles. So he goes home, calls up Abe. "Abe, I just saw a guy in Patterson." And Abe says, "Larry Doby." He said, "How do you?" He said, "Because there's a black guy who umpires a lot of their games. He called me about a month ago and said, 'You got to see this kid. We're going to give him a tryout in a day or two.'" So, okay. He says, at the tryout, he says, "I want this kid, Effa." Now, Effa was the general manager because this guy knew his baseball. He didn't want to manage. He didn't want to do any paperwork. He wanted to go to all the sandlots and find black kids who could play and ship them over to the manager. And that was his greatest joy. So Effa was a business manager, the toughest business manager in the whole league. She was the first to know they were going to go out of business. She could say, when they're going to start taking these guys, our people are going to start saving their money to go to Brooklyn, or when they come to Cincinnati, or when they, or Philadelphia, and we're not going to have a league anymore. She was trying to forestall that. Now, Bill Veeck is a cut from a different cloth. Bill Veeck's father was a sports writer and constantly criticizing the Chicago Cubs. So Wrigley, the chewing gum guy who owned the Cubs, says, "Let's have lunch." He said, "You know so much, you think. You know everything. I'm going to find out how much you know. I'm going to make you the general manager." He winds up as president of the Chicago Cubs. One day he says to young Billy, "Billy, come with me. We're going to the ballpark." They walk, they say hello, they go in, they say hello to the box office guys. And there's a room behind the box office. That's where the money goes, and that's where these guys are counting the money. He said, "Billy, what color is the money?" And Billy says, Dad, it's green." "And what color are the men counting the money?" "Well, they're all different colors." Never forget that. Now he goes to negotiate with Effa. Effa's a tough girl. And he says, "Miss Manley, I know what you've been through, and look, you need money, I need Larry Doby. I'll give you $10,000 to buy the contract out." She said, Mr. Beck, and she knew how to play her whole cards. Because what I'm telling you, she knew all those stories about Beck. She said, Mr. Beck, you know, and I know. If he were white, you'd be paying me $100,000. So I think you got to see a way to doing a little more. He said, well, I know you're going to take the 10 anyway, but I'm going to do this. I'm going to put another 5 on top of it if he lasts 30 days in spring training. Then she called him up and said, oh, by the way, I've been speaking to Mr. Beck. She called up Doby. Doby had played a day game in Newark. It was a weekend. He played a day doubleheader and a night game in Philadelphia in one day. He drives home. Well, you know, it was a tin can league. They had to make money. So he drives home. He's just 3 a.m. He just falls asleep. The phone rings. Larry, this is Mrs. Manley. Can you call me later? I'm going to sell your contract to the Cleveland Indians. Do you want to go? And he said, it's a joke, right? You're telling me a joke.
So July 5th, 1947, about 3 months-ish after Jackie Robinson debuts, Larry comes up. How does his experience go? How does it compare to Jackie's? Because from reading the book, in many ways, it almost seems like he had a more difficult experience
There's no
than Jackie did.
almost in there. I've written that many times, and I thought that Rachel Robinson might have been offended. But when I spoke at Larry's funeral, when she came to the funeral, she spotted me across the room and waved. So she understood what I was trying to do. He joined, first of all, the last at-bat for the Newark Eagles, you couldn't do it in a movie because people said that's too Hollywood. His last at-bat, he hits a home run to the opposite field, and he's running around, and they know, everybody knows he's not going to play the second game, doubleheader. He's going to be on a train. The whole team is out there to greet him. They realize this is a little bit more than a home run trot. And as I wrote in the book, he was not running toward home plate. He was running toward history. Now comes time that he's going to go to Cleveland. He stays overnight in a black hotel on the South Side. They sent a guy who worked for the PR offices there. See, here's what Beck did. He didn't want it to fail. The first chapter is called Cleveland Ain't Brooklyn. Brooklyn is Brooklyn. Cleveland segregated schools, segregated hospitals, a big amusement park of something beach blacks can't go. That's where he goes. And now he gets in a car. Beck is already there. And he says, nice to meet you, Mr. Beck. And Beck says, call me Bill. Now they're driving toward the ballpark. He says, it's going to be tough, you know. I'm not going to give you the Branch Rickey speech, which is over. I don't even know if he said it, Beck said. Beck didn't like it. Beck said, look, you're going to have slumps. Every baseball player has. You know, I'll know it first because I don't read game stories. I read box scores. When you're in a slump and it's lasted a week, I'm flying to wherever the team is. We're going to get the biggest steaks in town. We're going to go listen to the best jazz. We are not going to talk baseball, and you'll come out of this slump. And that's what he did.
So in 1976, Larry Doby showed up at your house in the middle of winter, which started your friendship, right?
Larry and Helen Doby made the world a better place while they were in it. Mike and Larry Jr. both really helped this book come to life because when I called Larry, Larry knew me. He knew who I was. First, I was their hometown columnist. And I called him and said, you know, I decided I'm going to do a book on your dad. Because I knew him for 35 years. And Junior said, that's great, Mr. Izenberg. I couldn't get him to call me Jerry. He won't do it now. That's Larry Sr. He's Mr. Izenberg, and don't you forget it. And Larry's no kid. So he said to me, well, so why are you calling me? I said, well, I'm going to need some help with the Doby family. He said, I'm going to tell you what. You know, Mr. Izenberg, my father had a very, very hard life, really tough. And he didn't trust a lot of people, very few. And you were one person he trusted completely. So for that, I'll help you with any kind of help you need. That's as near as I could figure out why Doby came to my house that night, you know. And he didn't know I was going to write a book. And the book was sort of a deathbed request from Monty Irvin, because I talked about, I wanted to write a book about both of them, and then a book about Larry. And it was all talk. I mean, then one day he said, "How's your book coming?" "Which book are you talking about?" He said, "The Doby book." I said, "Well, I'm doing research." I told him. He said, "We got to have that book, and you can't die till you finish it." And I said, "Why? What are you talking about? I mean, it's nonsense. You can't die. You were the last reporter to see us play in the black leagues. And every once in a while today, you write about it. And then to all the young black kids who say, oh, they wouldn't give you a league. You never had a league. You're the rebuttal. So you stay alive till you finish that book." I said, "Well, Monty, I'm going to do it. I can't give you the book on Thursday. I got a dentist appointment. But I'll finish it."
Yeah,
He gets
yeah.
he gets to Cleveland, all right? First of all, Beck was really smart. He had a scout sit in the grandstand, follow Doby, do not make contact with him. As far as he knows, you're just another white guy to like straight. Then that took care of the actual scouting. But then he had a guy who was Lena Horne's ex-husband, working in the front office, black guy. He said, "I want you to follow him at night. I want you to see where he goes. I want to know whether he's going to get us in trouble." So we had two guys following. Now the clincher came. There was a guy who wrote for the Pittsburgh Courier, one of the three most respected black papers in America. The guy was a baseball guy, and he's the guy that Ricky hired to be Jackie's roommate on the road that first year. And he was in Montreal too when Jackie played up there. And he was still scouting for the Dodgers. And Beck ran into him and said, "Hey, you ever see this guy Doby? Is he any good?" Well, this guy, he knew what was up, and he really laid it on. And so he had the Dodger scouting report. He had the guy who tracked his nightlife, and he had the good baseball guy. So now he signs. They're going to have a press conference over. Now they're in Chicago. They're playing the White Sox, Comiskey Park. Now he goes to join the team in the locker room. The manager doesn't want him. In my view, the manager hated him because of the way he treated him that first year. Players were not enthusiastic. There's three ways to break the color barrier that my experience. The first way was Ricky. Send him to Montreal. No racial problem. Let him get a year's experience, bring him up, and everybody knows he's coming up. The second way is when Monty Irvin and Hank Thompson broke the Giants' color line in New York. Leo was the manager, DeRocher. I was not a fan of Leo's, but I'll tell you, if he wanted to make a point, he made it. So in walked these two black guys in an all-white locker room, and I could never do it. I was a city kid, but I never could, the whistle with the
Yeah.
I never could do it.
No, I can't either. Yeah.
But he could. When the whistle goes off, everybody stop, because that's his signal. I want your attention. He said, "Hey, everybody, stop what you're doing. You see these two guys behind me? Monty Irvin has a chance to become the greatest hitter in the storied history of the Giants franchise. And the other guy plays 6 positions. I expect to win a pennant with these two guys within 2 years." And if you don't like it, go screw yourself. And he didn't say screw. Everybody laughed. It was a smooth, seamless. Now here comes Woodrow, who doesn't want him. He says, "Everybody get in your lockers." He makes a formal thing out of it. He said, "This guy with me is named Larry Doby. Mr. Beck thinks he can play." Now, he didn't say, we think he can play, or I think. He said, Mr. Vex, they're ready to go out for pregame warm-ups. And he goes out, and Joe Gordon, the second baseman, which I had to get in this book. He was my boyhood hero with the Newark Bears, and he was an 8-year All-Star with the Yankees and a 13-year
Hall of Famer,
All-Star
yeah.
second base, and a
Yeah.
Hall of Famer.
Yeah.
He runs over and says, glad to have you. Maybe we can win now. Shakes his hand. 5 guys shook his hand. 25 players, a manager, 3 coaches. 5 guys shook his hand. One of them was a coach. 2 guys, the first baseman and the backup first baseman, turned and faced the wall. And as Larry described it to me, yeah, some other guy shook my hand. They gave me like a dead fish hanging in the air. Didn't look me in the eyes. He didn't have a locker because they just added him to the team, and they were on the road. He goes in the men's room and he changes, hangs his clothes up, looks in the mirror, and he says, well, if they don't like it, screw them. I'm here and I'm playing. He walks, the locker room is empty. They're on the field warming up. He comes through there. He walks up the ramp to the tunnel. And when you walk that way, the sun hits you right in the eye when you get to the top step of the dugout. And it's a familiar sound. It's baseballs hitting gloves. He's heard it all his life. He stands there. They're warming up. Nobody would throw him the ball. Nobody. So he says, well, hell with this. I don't need this stuff. I'm going home. He turns, and as he turns, he gets elbowed in the ribs. Up come the hands. He's ready to fight. And it's Joe Gordon who's laughing. And Joe Gordon says, hey, rookie, you're going to keep styling in your brand new uniform, or you want to go warm up? And from that moment, before every game, they warmed up with each other and nobody else.
Eddie Robinson. He's first baseman, and Larry ends up being told he has to play first base. And what happens with him and Eddie?
I show you how much Woodward disliked him. It was the only game he started and played the whole game. He only had like 21 at bats. They used him as a pinch hitter and a pinch runner. And he has no first baseman. He said, well, Skip, I played a little first base, but that wasn't enough. He said, you don't want to play? Sit down. No, I want to play. So he goes over to Eddie Robinson, who became a pretty good player with the Orioles. He said, I hate to do this, but Skip shot me at first. Can I borrow your glove? There's like 20 stories about what happened with the glove. I know the real story. What? Robinson told him, no Negro, but he didn't say Negro, is going to put his hand in my glove. Bud Goldstein, who was a traveling secretary with the team, walked across the field and said to the Chicago first baseman, you got an extra glove? Yeah, I'd like to borrow it. Well, why do you want my glove? What do you care? I'll give it back to you when the game's over. And Larry Doby played first base with a glove borrowed from the opposition team. Later on, years later, Robinson had a reason, explained why, because he'd been promised. He felt this was a move to dislodge him at first base. And he didn't come there as a first baseman. He came there as a second baseman. Where was he going to play? Woodrow was his shortstop. Joe Gordon was his second baseman. Where the hell was Larry going to play? Which leads to a very interesting story. The year Larry joined the team, Tris Speaker, one of the greatest outfielders who ever lived. He's from Texas. Beck had signed him as goodwill ambassador to make speeches. Well, what happened was Beck knew he wasn't going to make the team this way. So at the end of the season, Bill McKechnie, who was a bench coach and a pitching coach, told him, you want to make this team next year, you've got to learn to play the outfield. Our outfielders are terrible. I've seen you hit. I mean, there's no question to me that you can hit if they ever give you a chance to swing a bat. But I didn't want to say too much about Woodrow because Woodrow was his boss. He said, go home and learn to play the outfield. And Larry said, that was the second time he saved my career. The first time they're in St. Louis, Jim Crow Town. There's a guy with a little megaphone standing in the first row of the grandstand overlooking the batting circle. He said, "You think he's up?" And he said, "See his wife, Helen. She spells her name Helyn. And in my hotel room last night, let me tell you what she did for me. Larry's up. He didn't need the bat. He's got one leg over the railing, right? Suddenly he's flying backwards, and on top of him is Bill McKechnie." He said, "Dobe, listen to me. Go back in those stands. You'll never play another baseball game. But this is the American League. They don't like you. They don't like your skin color. They hate you. And believe me, we won't get another black player for 10 years if you go in those stands." And Doby said to me, that was the first time he saved my career. The second was when he said, "Go home and learn to play the outfield." How do you learn to play the outfield? It's winter. He gets two high school kids hitting him fungos in the snow at Eastside High School. And then he goes to the public library and he buys a book written by Tommy Henrik, right fielder of the Yankees, How I Play Right Field for the Yankees. And armed with this knowledge, he's going to go back in a nice way. He's going to challenge the manager. Let me try out for the outfield. Well, Woodrow was not a nice guy, but he wasn't a fool. He knew he had no outfielders, and they were trying to trade at that point to get outfielders. I'm surprised he didn't put Doby in the trade. Never would have let him. So then Beck goes back to Tris Speaker. He had hired him as a goodwill guy, make speeches. Don't make any more speeches. You're going to teach this kid, who's 23, to play the outfield, which he never really played. Interesting combination. Speaker was from Humble, Texas, and a card-carrying member of the Ku Klux Klan. Doby had taken enough crap. He wasn't going to take any more crap from anybody else. And they became friends because in the process, he gave him outfield 101 and outfield 102 in spring training in the Tucson outfield, which had to be huge. It was bigger than the Cleveland Stadium outfield. So it was a good place to learn. But because they were so different in background, they began talking to each other about where they came from, what it was like. And their backgrounds were so different, they actually became friends. When he had cinched the center field job, that was a year later, Speaker told Shirley Povich, the sports columnist from the Washington Post, "This is the greatest young prospect I ever saw." He was brilliant. People don't know because in the 1954 World Series, Willie Mays makes what's called the catch. But according to Dizzy Dean, he said the greatest catch he ever saw in his life was made by Larry. The end of the season, a weak hitter, hits a ball deep. Larry's playing shallow. He runs to the fence, soars above the fence, leans in and catches the ball. And because he has no balance now, he pulls himself back and falls on the playing field. But how he gets to the playing field, he falls through the awning in the bullpen, hits on his side and holds the ball up like that. The next day, Dizzy Dean is being interviewed, and he said, "I don't know much about this outfielder, but I'll tell you what, this fella Doby, the pitcher ought to give him a month's salary because he saved his job. Maybe it was the greatest catch." And he said it was the greatest catch I ever saw. I'll tell you how good a center fielder he was. There was a year when the All-Star manager made Mantle the left fielder and Larry was the center fielder.
Wow.
Started.
Wow.
He was just, but what he went to, all right, his second year. Now guys are talking to him because he's hitting 318, something like that. His bat helps him get to the World Series. I made a lot of money in bars. Who was the first black man to hit a home run in Major League Baseball in the World Series?
Jackie Robinson. Yeah.
Larry Doby. In the fourth game, he hits a home run that supplies a winning margin. And after the game, everybody they hadn't been in the World Series for 28 years. Everybody in Cleveland loved Larry Doby all of a sudden, right? They loved him.
Yeah.
Oh, and the Cleveland Press photographer says, "Hey, take a picture with Doby The pitcher was the fourth guy in the starting rotation. All they wanted was 6 good innings. He went the whole way. Steve Gromek. Larry went over. They put their arms around each other. And that picture was on the front page of newspapers all over the South. I mean, when did you see a white man and a black man hugging on the front page of a Southern newspaper? It was incredible. And Larry said that picture, because he got the picture, he went to the guy and got the picture. He said that carried me through the tough times that were still to come. The other guy got more flack. Gromek went home to Upper Michigan. There was a guy owned a bar there who played Little League Baseball, American League Baseball, high school with him. Knew each other for like 30 years. He went to the bar to say hello. The guy walked right past. He said to a regular there, "What's wrong with him? Is he sick?" No, the picture, Larry, the picture. He immediately went over and confronted him. And he said, you could have shaken his damn hand. You didn't have to do that. Doby said, he told Doby told me, he walked past the guy, never said another word to him the rest of his life. Now, the kicker on that is Larry is dead, and he wins posthumously the Congressional Gold Medal for Citizenship. The front of that medal is the same everyone that's minted. The back of the medal, you picked the picture. Junior wanted to get Gromek. He had to get releases. Junior, that's what he wanted on the back of the medal. That's what they wanted. Junior's a road show honcho for the roadies who work for Billy Joel. He had a concert in Detroit. They lived at Hamtramck. And he called them up, and they said, well, we'll come in. I'll get your front row seats. You'll sign a release. They said, no, we want you to come to dinner at our house. So we did. Mrs. Gromek, who was in her 90s then, said, I am so happy for you and your father. So happy. And she hugged him. There were Gromek uncles, cousins by the dozens. There must have been about 20 people at this dinner. In 5 minutes, Steve Jr. said to me, it was like we knew him all our lives. He was just like his father. And they decided that's the picture that should be on there.
You played a pretty big role in getting Larry Doby into the Hall of Fame. What did you end up doing?
Jackie got in the Hall of Fame his first eligible year. Doby never got enough votes, and then he was transferred to the Veterans Committee. He doesn't get in the first 2 years. Now I'm writing columns. How can they keep this guy out? Well, I won't mention the guy. He's worked for a very respected paper, which is very into figures and averages and stuff like that. Not what's here. And the guy said to me, well, Jerry, you writing this silly stuff. He doesn't have the numbers. I said, let me ask you a question. Take Babe Ruth and Ty Cobb. And if they both had their lives threatened every night, and their children threatened, and their wives threatened every night, what do you think they would have hit? Then you tell me whether he belongs or not. Anyway, I kept writing it. Now it's the year he got in, and Larry says to me, Jerry, don't do it anymore. I don't mind it. I'm flattered, but you're embarrassing yourself. Don't write any more columns. I said, I'm going to write one more, and if you don't like it, tough. I wrote the meanest, nastiest column I could write. And in it, I said, why am I not surprised that you guys won't put him in the Hall of Fame when you are the same group of guys that didn't want him even to play a baseball game? I clipped out the column and I mailed it to every single member of the committee. I got one response. Dear asshole, it started. Monty and Yogi and I have been trying to get him in for 4 or 5 years now. Get off your fat, lazy ass and see if you can get us the votes we need. It was signed Ted Williams. Larry wasn't surprised when I told him because his very first year in the league, They used to be able to throw the gloves, leave them on the outfield grass, and then he'd go pick them up. He goes back there, and he bends over to pick it up, and somebody swats him in the ass. He turns around. It's Ted Williams. Keep your head up, rookie. You're going to be great.
And he was a 9-time All-Star. He led the league twice in home runs. I think that part of the problem with Larry is that we think he's a trivia question.
He became a trivia question because he did not have a friendly press in Cleveland. Sports editor / columnist on the Plain Dealer and the baseball beat writer on the Cleveland Press. They murdered him year after year. Murdered him. And in fact, he wins the World Series. Everybody in Cleveland now loves him. He comes back to Patterson, where he grew up from age 13 on. They put him in they didn't call them convertibles, they called them open cars. And the East Side High School marching band is in the street, and they have a parade, and the street is lined with Pattersonians. They take him to the East Side High School field, and everybody's ecstatic about it. 3 days later, he tries to buy a home in a segregated district. He can't buy a home. His wife needs the home because now she's pregnant, first time. And she's had a miscarriage before that. So Larry's beside himself, the Mayor Patterson. He couldn't get him in either. But he found a house that she liked in a nice, well-to-do section. And he made them sell him the house. Realtors didn't want to do it. It happened a second time, and then he moved out of Patterson, went to Montclair. And the interesting thing about Larry is he was not Jackie. Jackie never internalized. I mean, they talk about how he turned the other cheek and all that, but he had a team fighting for him. When Ben Chapman stood on the steps of the Phillies dugout, and screamed, "Hey boy, shine my shoes!" Eddie Stanky, not the nicest person in the world, I covered him, ran across the field and tried to punch him out. So he had a friendly locker room, which Ricky, I will say, made friendly because he said, "You want to play with the black man? I'll trade you." Believe me. He traded them all to Pittsburgh, who couldn't pay them a dime. And he traded Dixie Walker, until then, the most popular Dodger in history. They called him the People's Choice for choice. And he had a story too. Well, I own a sporting goods store, and if I play with a black man, they'll never patronize my store. He was from Alabama, I think, deep south. Everybody had a story about why they did what they did. Jackie and Rachel and the kids lived in Brooklyn. People saw them on the street. They saw them in the grocery store. And he was a part of the community. On the road to home, he had a friendly locker room.
Is he a bitter person? He's been through so much. What is he like?
He was a very bitter person.
Yeah.
But he wouldn't let his bitterness shine through. He had every right to be bitter. He never told Junior about all the bad times. He did much later when Junior was a man. Junior would come to him and say, "Dad, what was it like when you first..." I said, "That's ancient history. Go Google it. You can get it off Google." And the thing that pissed me off, and still does, they retired Jackie's number 42.
Yes.
Which they should have done. No disrespect to Robinson, because he went through a lot. Look, Larry Doby summed that up better than anybody ever. I said, "Did you ever feel jealous?" Because a lot of people think you did. I don't, but never. He said, "You have to understand, Jackie was the first. Jackie took all the crap, and Jackie caught hell for it. But nobody ever said when he was breaking in, 'We'll be nice to the second Negro.'" And nobody will. Well, very few people were. Jackie was beloved by his teammates and by people who live in Brooklyn because they're all crazy Dodger fans. I mean, they're lunatics. So it was baseball that made him. Larry was a different kind of person and cared more, not about blacks, cared more about everybody, about offending someone. I'm going to tell you a story that very few people know. I tried to talk him into telling the story at a Hall of Fame induction, and he wouldn't do it. When they would take spring training in Tucson, they started out with segregated Tucson. The train went through the whole South playing games against minor league teams. All segregated cities. And that first spring training, Satchel was not with the team, so he was not only the only black, he's the only black in the league. And then, you can imagine what happened at every stop. He gets down to the deep South, a really deep, deep South somewhere. It's where the train parks and divides, and after they play a series there against a minor league team, half goes to New York with the Giants, the other half goes to Cleveland. He's playing center field. His recollection was that it was in Columbus, Georgia, but I don't know that that's the right place. They're throwing beer bottles at him, beer cans at him, and he walks off the field. And I'll say this, Woodrow didn't say get back out there. Woodrow, that's what you want to do it. So he takes an early shower. He comes out of the locker room, and a tall black fella in a three-piece suit comes up to him and says, "Mr. Doby, can I talk to you?" He said, "Well, you're not going to throw beer at me. You can talk to me." He said, "Well, I'm the only black doctor in this town. My wife and I think it's a sin that you have to go to these boarding houses." That meant a cake of soap on the table, a cake of ice on the table, a little fan. That was the air conditioning blowing off the ice. Okay. So we want you to live with us. My wife will cook whatever you want. And he did for a couple of years. He said they treated me like family. Then one year he picked up the newspaper. There was a lunch counter demonstration, and the guy was shot to death. It was the doctor. And he was figuring about his speech. I saw him 2 days before. Well, I went up there with him, and we arranged a private tour of the Hall of Fame for me. Never been in it. Why could I go? I'm never going to get in. And I said to him, you got to tell that story. He said, "No, I don't think it's the right occasion." I said, "You owe that guy." He said, "I do, but I'll do it some other time." And what he did, he made the greatest 6-minute speech I have ever heard, not from an athlete, from anybody. 6 minutes, knew when to start, knew when to stop. And in that speech, he talked about the picture. He said, the picture. He said, baseball really needed that picture. And I am so proud and so happy that I could be one of the two guys who gave it to them. And he ended up by saying, a lot of people are saying baseball is not integrating fast enough. Well, we have the players now. We have very few black managers. I challenge anybody to look at baseball and to look at America and see which made better, more peaceful, and more complete integration, baseball or America. Then he sat down, and I have a picture in my book. Most people saw it. He sat down, and he's wiping the tears out of his eyes.
That was Jerry Izenberg. His book, Larry Doby in Black and White, The Story of a Baseball Pioneer, is out now. We talk to people in and around baseball literature every week on the podcast and publish around 50 writers every year in the Twin Bill Literary Journal. You can support us on Patreon. Until next time,